good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to the NDC Partnership's second Youth Engagement Forum on the topic of inclusive finance. My name is Putra Zenata, or Zen for short, and I'm the Regional Program Officer for Asia Pacific and Eastern Europe with the NDC Partnership Support Unit. I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. We hosted a regional session for Africa, Europe, and the Middle East last week, and are offering a Latin America and Caribbean discussion on Thursday. Registration details are on our website. As we begin today, I would like to quickly share guidance on how we will run the event. We have live interpretation available today in Spanish and French. In your Zoom toolbar, please click on the globe icon and select your preferred language. While listening to the interpreters, you can select mute original audio so the main presenter is silenced if you're having issues hearing the interpreter. If you have technical issues during the event, please use the chat feature located in the Zoom toolbar, and a member of our team will be able to offer support. The event is being recorded and will be shared on other virtual platforms after today. With those quick housekeeping notes, we would like to begin the event with a video message from the NDC Partnership co-chairs, the Right Honorable Alok Sharma, COP26 President from the United Kingdom, and Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation from Jamaica.
Ladies and gentlemen, as co-chair of the NDC Partnership, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Youth Engagement Forum. The NDC Partnership is critically important. Over 115 countries and more than 80 institutions joined in a global coalition working together to drive transformational climate action. Just the type of climate action that we saw 8 months ago at COP26, where, under the UK stewardship, almost 200 countries agreed the historic Glasgow Climate Pact. That pact forged a path to a clean global future and kept alive the possibility of limiting the rise in average global temperature to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Of course, much has changed in the months since. We meet against a backdrop of multiple global crises, much precipitated by the Putin regime's brutal, illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And even as we deal with these immediate challenges, all the evidence makes clear that the chronic threat of climate change is getting worse. The need for action is becoming increasingly urgent. We must deliver on the commitments we made in Glasgow. Nationally determined contributions are central to this work. In particular, every country must respond to the call to revisit and strengthen their NDC as they committed to do in Glasgow. And they must do so not at some vague point in the future, but this year in 2022. And the major emitters, the G20 nations, must lead from the front, particularly those countries with little or no increase in ambition since Paris. These NDCs, along with the long-term strategies for how to deliver them, need to be submitted before the UNFCCC's synthesis report deadline of September the 23rd. The NDC Partnership allows countries to access the support they need to develop and implement these commitments. And I was proud to announce at last month's Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda that the UK is doubling its contribution to the Partnership Action Fund to £10 million. And I would encourage countries to use that resource. And I also want to emphasize the vital role that young people have to play in pushing countries to be more ambitious in their NDC and indeed across the climate action that they're taking. Young people were at the heart of so much of what we achieved at COP26. The collective call to action of hundreds of young delegates pushed parties forward. And through the NDC Partnership support, young people were directly engaged in NDC enhancement. Out of the 67 countries supported by the partnership, 46 made their processes more open to input from youth stakeholders, and 42 directly addressed the needs of young people. So your participation in the work to tackle the climate crisis was and remains essential. You can hold governments to account, pushing us to go further and faster. And I'm confident that you can and that you will shape the future. Thank you.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to join you today digitally. The crisis we face, climate change, is indeed the great challenge of our generation. Young people have been dealt a bad hand.
Okay, Lisa.
The issue, the crisis, and the impact of climate change will unfortunately be with you for your lifetime. It is precisely why the NDC Partnership has convened this group of young people to ensure that as we tackle this issue, you are not just a part of the solution, but you are active in crafting the way forward. The NDC Partnership has been very successful in mobilizing countries through their leadership, global NGOs, and indeed financing partners to ensure that climate contributions are heading in the right direction. But there's much more to do. It is through the voices of young people in every generation that solutions have been found and global leaders have been forced to commit. There can be no doubt that we require mass mobilization of climate financing. Developing nations like Jamaica are indeed willing to do what we must by way of climate action. We're putting in place steps for mitigation. We're putting in place plans for adaptation. But there has to be a massive increase in the deployment of capital from more developed nations. And this is why we have invited you here today. Because though the NDC Partnership, the UNCDF, and other global partners are working around the clock, we need young people like yourselves to not just lend your voice, but to be a part of the planning. The scale of the problem we face demands a massive upscaling of climate ambition. But beyond that climate ambition, we must ensure that developing countries such as Jamaica take advantage of the newly launched NDC financing strategy. We had the opportunity to launch that strategy under the auspices of Prime Minister Andrew Holness here in Jamaica. But that strategy demands the action and participation and energy of young people. Jamaica, as its co-chair of the NDC Partnership, welcomes you today. And we encourage you to, after today, to lend your voices to this global challenge. And it is in that regard I thank you for joining us here.
Well, thank you to our co-chairs for offering these inspiring remarks to kick off the session today. I would like now to turn to Dr. Pablo Vieira, the Global Director of the NDC Partnership. Pablo, we welcome your opening remarks to set the stage for our conversations today.
Thank you very much, Sen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Pablo Vieira. I am the Global Director of the NDC Partnership Support Unit. I am currently in Washington, D.C., and I just want, on behalf of the NDC Partnership, to say how excited we are to welcome you to the second annual Youth Engagement Forum, which will be focused, as you heard before, this year on inclusive climate finance. The NDC Partnership brings together more than 200 members, including 120 countries, both developed and developing, and more than 80 institutions, both intergovernmental organizations and institutions that represent non-state actors. And we all together create and deliver on ambitious climate action that helps achieve both the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. Meeting the challenges of climate change means empowering and supporting all countries to develop on a low emissions, climate resilient basis. That's the only way to achieve true sustainability. This requires ambitious NDCs, ambitious commitments to fight climate change, and investments on a vast scale to implement mitigation and adaptation actions. So we're here today in recognition of the powerful role that young people play in driving climate action and channeling their expertise, their experience, their drive, and their innovation into financing for NDC implementation in the critical years to come. We are very proud of the NDC Partnership's Youth Engagement Plan, or what we call YEP, which was co-created by more than 475 youth participants and 46 members to drive active participation of young people in member countries and global activities to tackle the climate crisis. The YEP embodies the core values of the NDC Partnership. It is country-led. It brings together partners of diverse perspectives and expertise. It promotes inclusive decision-making processes, and it mobilizes actors that can have a major impact on NDC implementation and enhancement. Young people play a vital role in pushing governments to raise climate ambition and increase their climate finance commitments. Your voices and platforms are critical in driving behavioral change by raising societal awareness and citizen activism. Mobilizing finance is very complex and very challenging, especially for developing countries. So to accelerate access to finance, we need to collectively increase our efforts to close the gap between the financing that countries need to implement their NDCs and the enabling environments and project pipelines that financial institutions and investors are seeking. To bridge this gap, the NDC Partnership offers a wide range of services to its members, from supporting policy frameworks and integrating NDCs into national development plans and budgets, to supporting NDC investment planning, identifying NDC-aligned projects, and mobilizing different sources of finance. The Youth Engagement Plan and this forum are the starting point for greater action on youth engagement in NDC implementation and finance mobilization. Today, we will hear the challenges, the opportunities, and identify areas for further training on this shared path for inclusive climate finance and an inclusive world. Together, we are supporting youth leaders' expertise on financing to combat the climate crisis. We all have the responsibility to ensure that future generations are equipped with the skills and capacities they need to drive this necessary transformation. The NDC Partnership is committed to ensuring more inclusive, impactful, and ambitious climate action now and for future generations. And we look forward to an interactive discussion today so that we can better understand and work together on how to drive this transformational change. So I wish you the best for today's conversations, and I thank you for your attention. Back to you, Sen.
Thank you very much, Pablo, for your insightful sharing. We appreciate your leadership and commitment to strengthening our work through the Youth Engagement Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a dynamic agenda today. We are thrilled to be joined by a group of inspiring leaders, young leaders on the end, and we'll hear from them shortly. Please use the Q&A function to share questions for the panelists and moderator. We have a lightning video later to showcase takeaways from a recent International Renewable Energy Agency Global Council on Enabling Youth Action for the 7th Sustainable Development Goal webinar. As you may know, the SDG 7 aims to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. We will then open a 2-question poll to gather additional insight from everyone in the audience before closing remarks from our regional manager in Asia Pacific. Afterwards, we welcome you to switch over to a separate Zoom link for an hour-long teach-in session where you have 3 choices of workshops carefully crafted by partners that are doing really amazing work in this space in climate action. And if you haven't already, please register for these sessions using the link in the chat. But first, colleagues from the NDC Partnership Support Unit will offer a brief overview of climate finance.
Welcome to this event. I am Jesus Alvarado, Climate Finance and Analysis Specialist with the NDC Partnership Support Unit, and I'm joined today by my colleague Guli Sabahi, who is our senior advisor on climate finance at the NDC Partnership Support Unit. So thank you all for joining. The climate crisis is one of the biggest challenges of our time, especially in most vulnerable countries and low-income countries. Without external support, many countries are often not able to afford the cost of actions addressing climate change. And this makes climate finance a critical vehicle to help countries avoid and reduce emissions, as well as to adapt to the dangerous effects and impacts of climate change. Today, we will do this Climate Finance 101 through an interview with Guli to explain what climate finance means, the status of climate finance globally, and the NDC Partnership work on climate finance. So, Guli, let me start with the first question. Can you tell us about what climate finance means?
Thank you, Jesus. Climate finance refers mainly to investments and other financial resources directed towards, number one, climate mitigation to avoid and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and two, climate adaptation to build resilience to climate change impacts. Most of the countries now have NDCs, national determined contributions, which are national strategies that include mitigation and adaptation targets of a country. Climate finance is used to help countries meet those NDC targets through financing NDC-aligned projects and actions to achieve the long-term objectives of the Paris Agreement. To understand climate finance, it may be useful to look at it through its four key dimensions formulated by the CPI in their reporting on climate finance, and they use the broadest definition of climate finance. Number one, on sources. They include public sources like government budgets and institutions funded by governments, and private sources like private banks and companies. They can also be domestic sources generated within a country, for example, from national development banks or local companies, or international, coming from outside the country, from multilateral development banks or international commercial banks. Instruments, the second dimension. There are many different instruments through which climate finance is channeled. Some of the key examples include grants that typically don't require repayment. They also include debt that requires repayment and doesn't usually tolerate the risk of non-repayment. Concessional debt refers typically to debt at rates below market rates, and non-concessional debt refers typically to debt at market rates. Equity is another important example. That's the riskiest form of capital that expects repayment, but can take the risk of non-repayment. You also need risk insurance and guarantees to protect these investments. We need a combination of these different forms of capital and tools to come together, for example, through blended finance structures to fund NDC-aligned projects. Third dimension, uses. Climate finance, as we discussed, used primarily for mitigation and adaptation, or the projects that have a dual benefits, both mitigation and adaptation benefits combined. Fourth dimension, sectors. Most of the mitigation finance currently is in renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors. Low carbon transport is the fastest growing sector. Mitigation investments in hard to decarbonize sectors like infrastructure and buildings remains low. And on adaptation side, the largest share of finance is going towards cross-sectoral activities as well as water and wastewater projects. Over to you, Jesus.
Thank you very much, Guli. And thank you for this comprehensive overview. Could you please quickly review for us the status of climate finance globally, both in terms of opportunities and gaps?
Absolutely. And looking again through the CPI's latest report, on climate finance flows for 2019-2020, you will see that total climate finance has increased over the last decade, reaching 632 billion US dollars. But flows have slowed in the past few years, and this is a worrying trend. CPI reports that there is a need of increase of at least 590% in annual climate finance to get us on the track. About 51% of climate finance comes from public sources, mostly development finance institutions, DFIs, and other 49% from private sources, mostly private companies. Flows from all sources need to increase. We all know public finance alone cannot fund climate action. Private finance is instrumental, and scarce public finance sources need to be deployed effectively to increase and mobilize private finance, particularly from institutional investors and other providers of capital that have some of the largest pools of capital. In terms of instruments, the debt at market rates, our non-concessional debt, remains the largest source. There is a need to increase other forms of financing, such as grant financing, particularly for adaptation projects, as well as equity and loans at rates below market rates, or concessional debt financing. In terms of uses and sectors, most of the climate finance was used for mitigation. Although investments for adaptation have increased, they remained far below the scale required. This imbalance between adaptation and mitigation finance can in many cases be explained by the fact that mitigation projects, they generate revenues or create cost savings and are therefore more economically attractive to investors and lenders. Whereas adaptation projects, they have benefits for the society at large, but they may not have ability to generate immediate revenues for the investors and lenders. And that's what makes mitigation projects more bankable, more attractive to banks and other investors for loans and other financing. Over to you, Jesus.
Great. So can you please tell us about the work of the NDC Partnership in supporting countries to access climate finance?
Sure. The NDC Partnership, through its members, supports countries to implement their NDCs by establishing plans which translate NDC targets into specific projects and actions that require funding. Many members of the partnership include developed countries, multilateral development banks, and other development finance institutions. And their support is critical for developing and financing NDC-aligned projects and incentivizing private investments in those projects. In our work, we try to help bridge the finance gap, focusing on issues on the demand side, on the government side that demand and need financing, as well as the supply side on the sources of financing. We have recently launched our finance strategy, and this slide shows some of our key offerings for developing countries. It's important to note that each of us plays a key role in bridging the finance gap, and it all starts from having a solid understanding of climate finance issues. So we appreciate you joining us today. Hope this was useful.
Thank you very much, Guli, and thank you for the audience. And we look forward to staying connected and continue with the rest of the event. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you to Guli and Jesus. We are so pleased that so many of you have joined the second NDC Partnership Youth Engagement Forum. We are very excited to be here today, gathering new partners, growing a youth network, and building capacity through teach-ins from innovative and inspiring colleagues. It is now my pleasure to hand the floor to our moderator of the panel discussion, P. Min Nguet, or Mooney. Mooney is a senior research analyst at Climate Bonds Initiative and currently manages a social and sustainability bond database at Market Intelligence within CBI. She has years of expertise in the banking and finance industry, as well as green development and sustainable finance in the region. Mooney, thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, like wherever you are. Welcome to today's panel discussion session, where we have opportunities to listen to our distinguished speakers sharing their thoughts and experiences on how to get young people engaged in climate financing for climate purposes. Also, we will have like opportunities to explore best practices, priorities, and needs of young people in the climate finance world. And once again, as we go along, audience, please feel free to pop any questions you may have in the Q&A box. So before we jump into the main discussion, I would like to introduce our speakers today. Joining with me today in the panel, we have Buche Meka, who is a senior analyst at Climate Growth Center. We have Ichkar Dutch Suren from Climate Change Research and Cooperation Center of Ministry of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia. And finally, we have Anish Sreta, who is the Executive Director of the Youth for Environment, Education and Development Foundation. So welcome all of you. Before we start panel, could you please introduce in brief about yourself and what you and your team are doing? So we go in round perhaps. First, Anish, please. Anish, could you please introduce about yourself and your organization?
Already to the area of this is me. I'm currently
Excuse me, Anish. There seems to be a connection loss from your side. We can't hear you.
For the youth environment and development.
Hello, Anish.
Maybe
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but maybe we will let Anish some time to fix his issue. So I would like to introduce Ichkar, like to introduce about herself and what she and her team is doing. Anish, please. Sorry, Ichkar, please.
Okay. Thank you, Muni, for giving me an opportunity to introduce myself and about my team. And good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all the participants. So as Muni introduced, my name is Ichka for short, and I work at the Climate Change Research and Cooperation Center, which is a state-owned enterprise functioning under the Ministry of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia. So our organization is mainly responsible for the technical side of climate change policies. So namely, we are responsible for conducting the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory and also preparing national reports on climate change that we must submit to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So in terms of myself, I am an administrative officer at the CCRCC, and so I am involved in basically all day-to-day activities of the organization. And my main responsibility is to assist in submitting the 4th National Communication and the 2nd Biennial Update Report of Mongolia to the UNFCCC. So that's over to you, Muni. That's all about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ichkar. Interesting. So let's move over to Buche. Buche,
yes,
the voice
thank you. You're pronouncing it right. Thank you, Muni. Yes, hi everyone. Nice to be here. Definitely. My name is Buche. I'm currently working as a senior analyst at the Climate Work Center, which is a research institution nonprofit under the Monash University Australia on climate change. But I am based in Jakarta, Indonesia, working mostly on Indonesia and Southeast Asia region. And in terms of my focus, I'm working mostly on climate finance, helping governments, businesses basically mobilize finance for climate, advising them with what they can do in order to make climate positive investments. I'm also working on carbon market, oceans, and land use issues. Still on climate finance, but in those sectors specifically. Yeah, I think that's me. In short, I'm looking forward to discuss more with all of you. Back to you, Moni.
Yeah, thank you so much, Puche. And now let's move back to Anish. Anish, are you ready?
Yes. Hello everyone. So this is me, Anish Shrestha. I'm currently based in Nepal and also from Nepal. I work here as an executive director for Youth for Environment, Education and Development Foundation and youth-led non-profit, non-government organization which works on the intersections of the environment, education, and the sustainable development, especially for the young peoples, and also targeting indigenous peoples and local communities. And I'm also engaged in the various youth engagement and youth facilitation issues and sector, especially pertaining to the climate change, environment, and to the local, national, and to the global level. And I'm currently serving as one of the Asia Regional Focal Point, RFP, for the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, which is the Indigenous Youth Network organization for the indigenous youth, individuals and organizations in the global level, which advocates for the indigenous youth presence and advocacy in the UN and other multilateral engagement mechanism, and also currently working as the partnership coordinator for the SAARC Youth Platform, the South Asia Regional Platform of the youth organization, and also in the same field, the global focal point for the disaster risk reduction working group of the Major Group for Children and Youth, MGCY. And I have been also helping and assisting various organizations with the consultation and the youth engagement and thoughts to be pulled out and input to the climate finance and other mechanisms. That's very important on pretending and connecting to the climate action. So this is my short introduction, and over to you, back our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anish. That's interesting. So now I really want to start off the discussion with the very first question. And I would like to go to you, Anish, for the first one, following up on what you have just shared about your organization, Youth for Environment, Education and Development Foundation. So from your experience and your work with the organization, can you share, like, in more detail, how does your work support the capacity of youth leaders in Nepal?
Yeah, of course. As you know, youth, the first youth need information to connect to any topic that they are interested in. So without information, so people are confused what to start and where to start and how to go forward. So in the climate or space or in the environmental space also, they know the problems, but they also know the mostly the solution. But there's always a gap on with the problem to solution. So how they can start, because activism will need a various kind of resources, including technical expertise, the knowledge, idea, and then also, of course, and then comes the finance, the financial resources that is required to undertake that activity. So we, I'm mostly connecting them with the information that we receive from our networks on what is available at what ends. So means at the local level, at the national level, at the Asia Pacific regional level, for us, and then at the global level. So there's a lot of partnership we can generate. So through partnership, we can support each other. So we can support the local youth. We can support then the other countries. Youth from other countries can support them with the knowledge, with the information, with the various resources they have, and then the organizations that are in the local to global level also do the same. So we give them information, we give them training, we then give them capacity building tips and skills that's required to undertake that activity or the climate empowerment work. So this is where the most important thing. So I am trying to facilitate this through my organization, and have been quite successful. And especially like, we have the mechanism like the Climate Investment Fund, SIF, which is supporting the various civil society organizations, not only the youth, but youth has also been benefiting a lot. So finance can come from the institution like that, the SIF, which is the financing mechanism. And the same way, there's a lot of other financing mechanism in the various level, from the local government to the various other donor organizations, multilateral agencies, international INGOs, international non-governmental organizations. So with the information capacity building, with the training, and with the consultation, and with the whatever support, technical to other guidance, we're trying to facilitate this.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Really, I do agree with you, like not only for young people, but for other organizations in general, like information gap, knowledge gap, and finance gap are very important just to act as a deterrent for them to start off any projects, I mean, and to provide them with such information, such knowledge, and such technical support, and get them engaged with some climate funds, really important to help like make everything come true. Okay, thank you so much. So I bet that your organization definitely sets a good example for other youth organizations, not only in Nepal but worldwide. Thank you so much again, Anish. I will go back to you in a bit, but now let's move over to Puche. Okay.
Thank you. Looking forward to having more discussion. And thanks for this question. Yeah.
Sure.
Bye.
Okay. Hi, Puche. So I know that you work closely with climate finance questions each day, looking at everything from Indonesia's enabling environment to regional carbon markets and sector-specific policies. So can you share with us what some of the main financing challenges or trends are for the region?
Yes, thank you, Mooney. This is interesting questions. So, well, first thing first, there are a lot of challenges. And to bring you some context, when we're talking about climate finance, what we're talking about is generally how can we mobilize finance in a way that goes towards climate positive investments, projects, programs, whatever that is. So in order to do that, there are a lot of steps in a way, there will be a lot of barriers in a way, and each barrier is, I believe, is specific to any localities, not just countries. But to sum up, to conclude in general, I think there are three main challenges, if I have to summarize. The first challenge that I've encountered a lot is awareness. Agreeing with Annie's point, awareness on climate change is very much important, and to some extent it's very much low even among the critical decision makers in so many countries, not just Indonesia. Because I think part of the reasons why this happens is because climate change as a concept, as a scientific concept, arguably can be pretty complex. You have to explain about the average temperature rise, and all those understanding requires time to process. And even I think one research that just recently came out from the Yale Center for Communications, I think, shows that in Indonesia, for example, more than 3/4 of the population do not really grasp of what climate change really is, despite having felt the impact of it. So that is the first challenge. It's about awareness. And the second is responding to those after having the awareness, of course, or what to do next is how to respond to that, which is basically the second challenge is for me is how to convince them to create the enabling policies for climate investments. Because the policymakers, for example, they have the power to create the policies that are supportive of mobilizing financing for climate. we know that public budget, government budget, our taxpayer money will never be enough to finance our 1.5-degree goals or net zero goals. We need private investors as well. We need companies, even regular people to participate in this. So the second challenge is how to make all these stakeholders think about this, how to make them basically collaborate, join together to face these challenges that we all face together. And I think the third challenge for me is to basically mainstream the concept of inclusiveness, fairness, and justice into the designing of policies, into decision-making processes. Because when we're talking about climate finance, it's not enough to just talk about the dollars amount or the degree of Celsius of increase that we will prevent by investing this amount of money. It's not enough just that. We have to think about the impact of the investment to people, to the local people, and how do we make sure that the investment decisions are centered on people who will be most affected mostly by the investment. So basically, to sum up, I think the last challenge is to how to make sure that people are active participants in the decision making related to climate finance.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I do agree with you. Like three main challenges that you had just said. From my own experience working in my country and in the region. For example, in Vietnam, like raising people's awareness about climate change is a challenge, really. Not many people in Vietnam have like full awareness of climate change. Even though we can see a shift in the decision makers awareness about climate change, and they have put some policies regarding to climate change in their national policies, but it's just not sufficient and not clear at this moment. So as you said, climate change is a scientific concept, and they are not really, they don't really understand what it really is. And the secondly, public, it really about finance. Public finance is never enough, and how to get other stakeholders, for example, private stakeholders into the combat, into combating climate change is very important, and inclusiveness. Yeah, how to get inclusiveness and everyone, the benefits of everyone into the decision-making process. Yeah, thank you so much, Putri. Very interesting. So the next question will go to Ichka actually. Hi Ichka, I'm going to ask you a question. Yeah. So can you share how Mongolia is taking steps to emphasize youth engagement and inclusion in national determined contribution processes? Are there any successes to replicate across the region?
Oh, thank you for the question, Muni. So before I start answering the question, I think I would like to share a little bit of background information about my country's NDC target. So our country first submitted our first, the intended nationally determined contribution in 2015. And our target was to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 14% by 2030. And in 2020, we updated that target to 22.7%. Even though our country's total greenhouse gas emissions is like below 2% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, we are committed to delivering our contribution to the Paris Agreement. And so going into the question about youth engagement, the Mongolian government is focusing more on activities related to public awareness. So for example, in 2021, the Ministry of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia organized a Climate Week, which was a virtual campaign about spreading awareness about climate change and climate policies through Facebook and other social media outlets. This was a pretty successful event. And we also engaged with youth during this event by organizing this small, not small, we organized this competition between youth, an essay competition about how they can contribute to climate action. And we received around more than 100 materials from students all over the country. And the second event that the ministry has organized was fairly recently in May, which was the NDC Forum. And it was organized not in the capital city, but it was actually in the Erdenet, which is another, the second largest city in Mongolia. And this was a 2-day event, and the second day was fully focused on youth engagement and activities related to that. So now focusing on Climate Change Research and Cooperation Center, as our center has also been working closely with youth. So our organization is very young. We were established in May of 2020 and started we started operating officially in 2021. So last year we had climate change workshops organized for university students. And we particularly focused on the National University of Mongolia, the National University of Humanities, and the University of Science and Technology. And to our surprise, the students actually didn't have that much information, that much knowledge about climate change. And they were at the end of the workshop, all students were very eager to learn more about climate change and climate change policies. So another event that we organized was in collaboration with a local non-government organization. And we funded the NGO to organize a sustainable school hackathon, which was organized back in April. And the event was successful. We had over 100 applications come in for the hackathon, but we chose 42 students from all those from the applications, and they were all from high school. And we aim to choose mostly from public schools because public school students do not have limited access to information and also information compared to private schools. So, during this event, we had a competition. We divided the students into 8 groups and then asked them to come up with an innovative idea on how to make your school area more sustainable. And at the end, the group that came first was had a very a very innovative idea about making the classroom more energy efficient. And it was actually the cost of the project was actually very affordable. So reflecting on these experiences, I think that youth engagement although the government is doing a lot of activities on enhancing youth engagement, however, there is still more to do from our side, especially on raising public awareness about the climate change basis, especially on the science side. So that is some of the successful events that come into my mind. Yeah.
Okay.
Over to you, Muni.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you so much, Ichka, for the sharing. So I can understand that at this moment, Mongolian government is focused on strongly focused on raising public awareness about climate change and climate change policies via various series of activities. And it a good thing is that the government just can get engaged a lot of other stakeholders, for example, NGO into the activities so like I would like to have a follow-up question along the process. What do you think are the challenges to tackle for more inclusive climate action, and how to engage more and more people, young people, into the climate action campaigns?
So using social media as a tool actually would be one of the more effective ways, because right now, like social media is quite big in Mongolia in terms of youth. I think it's all around the world. Social media plays a major role. So using Facebook or Instagram or social media campaigns is actually very effective in instigating interest in about this issue for youth.
Okay, yeah. So can you see any challenges like along the way you implement such social media campaigns and to engage people into such activities? Like,
yeah,
any challenges you encounter along the way?
So along the way, so most of the social media campaigns and those came from like international project funds. However, when it comes to NGOs, when they want to organize some social media campaigns and stuff, we don't actually have much financing for that. So securing financing was actually very a huge thing. Well, it was a huge challenge for us. And then also like ensuring inclusivity, especially ensuring participation from students from other regions, like from the countryside where they don't have stable internet connection. That was one of the biggest challenges. And I think that's one of the things that we need to focus more in the future. Maybe like since COVID restrictions are easing, maybe we could go to the countrysides to have some more workshops and engaging activities with students in the region or youth in the region. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Definitely funding is all the way the problem, and how to get more and more people engaged into the activities is very important. And just to share from my country, like even though when we have like funding for such social media campaigns, so yeah, getting people into the activities very hard, very difficult when they don't have full understanding about climate change and they don't care about climate change. Yeah, thank you so much, HK. So young people play a very critical role in raising global attention on the urgent need to act on climate and even implementing climate projects, I think so. However, it seems that they are facing with resource and skill shortages to create a bankable projects and put their own projects into practice. With that, I would like to come back to Anish. Anish, from your own experiences, specifically looking to climate finance as a knowledge and capacity gap, as you mentioned earlier, what resources or skills could be provided to help youth better understand and access finance? Hello, Anish. Can you hear me?
Unmute. Yeah. Sorry for the delay.
Yes.
Can you repeat your question? I had some internet issues. Yeah.
All right, sure. So from your experience, when we look to climate finance as a knowledge and capacity gap, as you said earlier, right? What resources or skills could be provided to help our youth better understand and access to climate finance?
Yes, as you know, resources are always scarce. In natural resources, financial resources, technical resources, always this limited. So we have to find a way to utilize the resources at the optimum level with the best interest of the nature, with the best interest of time, and with the best interest of the required, whether that is required. So, we need to first find the right place for the right investment of right resources. So as you know, youth are doing on multiple of initiatives on various levels, especially on the climate work. So be it like entrepreneur, be it like the projects initiative at the community level, or with the empowering, capacity building, and mobilizing the other youth peers there at their locality, in various level, that also. So we're trying to, as you know, with the support of these multilateral institutions, to show first the need, where the need is. So where the access is required, and how we can give the access. So I think one thing you also miss is like we also have a lot of small grant opportunities these days opening up. So like also UNDP has a small grant initiative, and then other various organizations also $3,000, $5,000. So there's a lot of call for project proposals for the youth. So if the youth knows the like there's a this kind of information with that resources are available, and we can provide them with the knowledge, with the information, and with the technical support to get them the skills required, or the information, and the documentation required to file those proposals, and then they will be able to secure some resources for their need, or to deploy to their projects and initiatives. So this is one thing. And then I think the other thing is like to get also like to not the what is available right now is of course very limited, very limited. And I think it's also not coming up very recently. Earlier it was very limited opportunity for the youth, but now as the advocacy of the youth, and also these national to international organizations opening up, it's a bit easier. But still the youth from rural background, from the indigenous background, doesn't have that level of knowledge, that level of information, and that level of capacity to do that. So first we also need to build the capacity. So through these kind of institutions, and even the NDC partnership unit, so we have to partner with the youth. So I'm just pointing out that partnerships is very important. So if the multilateral institutions, climate investment fund, and international governmental, non-governmental organizations consider youth as a partner, then the youth from various backgrounds, from the rural, marginalized youth, indigenous youth, can get the various information as a partnership, exchange with them, and then get to the access to the information and the resources that is required. So we need the empowerment for the youth to have that. And for the access, we also need the more resources to be deployed at the local level, and not to make it so much difficult. So it should be easy, it should be accessible in terms of the documentation, in terms of the process that is required to obtain that, because it's often very hard for the youth, the local youth, or youth from the grassroots to access those, because there's a lot of documentation required, a lot of legality, a lot of reports. So we need to minimize those hassles, and give best that they can work in the best interest of their community and the nature. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anish. Really, so again, finance knowledge and technical are also the limitations that young people have to face in order to produce a kind of practical projects regarding to climate change. And I agree with you that we need to build their capacity and to build the skills to develop a practical and feasible proposal so that they can access to finance in terms of grants, for example, from initiatives, so that you have finance to develop their own ideas. And yet, one recommendation is for other organizations, for initiatives or NGOs or some other multilateral organizations else that they to expand the partnership with the youth and to make the process and documents more accessible to young people, given that they are inexperienced but they innovative, right? And if they have a chance to access to finance, and I think somehow they can develop some very good ideas. Yeah, thank you so much, Anish. Alongside with the discussion we have just said, we will see that the finance is key in promoting youth climate projects. In the video earlier, we also heard the push for diverse sources of climate financing. It could be private, it could be public, or it could be the combination between private or public and other different types of funding, etc. So, Puche, can you share your thoughts about the opportunity to diversify funding sources and tailor options to the needs of recipients in your region?
Yes, thank you, Muni. So I think along the line with what Anish just mentioned earlier, there is definitely a problem with access to finance, especially if we are talking about youth. The context to that, usually in many countries, youth are not as they're not considered to have an equal standing with policymakers regarding critical decisions on investments, for example, and especially investment that impact climate. Hence, they need, in order for youth to be able to influence such decision, they need support, alternative financing support, maybe from outside of from their countries, not from their country's resources. Hence, access, this is where access becomes important. And to improve the problem of access, it has to come to both sides. Either first is for just like Annie said, increasing the capacity of the recipient itself for them to be able to access finance. But the second and most important part is for the sources of finance itself. How they can basically trying to meet them in the middle, and how they can do that is through a lot of different type of instruments, financial instruments, modalities. For example, it could be through grants that you can say call for proposal, call for expression of interest, all of those. That it could also be channeled through the existing public governmental body in the countries, if they already have specific mandates for youth empowerment, for example, or it could be through even through non-state actors, NGOs, and even some private companies who may have already been doing youth empowerment program as part of their corporate social responsibilities, for example. So basically, I think to sum up, the opportunities to diversify funding is to first understand what are the problems on the access to finance, list them out, and see if there is already existing channels that are not yet optimized in the region, either it's public institution or private institution, and then financier themselves can figure out what would be the best mechanics, the best instruments that they can deploy through via what intermediaries that they see as a very high potential in the country, so that these financing that they have can be effectively channeled to the recipient, which is the youth themselves. Sorry. Yeah, hope that answer your questions, Muni.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you so much, Puche. So, Ichka, I would like to come back to you with the second question. So young people are more aware of climate crisis than older generations. I bet that. And they are more engaged in responding to it. However, when it comes to decision making on climate change, young people often lack a seat at the table. So from your experience working with the governments of Mongolia, where are young people best placed to impact national discussions around climate finance? And how you would advise youth leaders work in their governments to drive inclusive change?
Thank you, Mooney, for the question. Yes, I agree with you on that the youth are actually not included in the decision-making process. And in terms of youth engagement in climate finance, Mongolia, I see that Mongolia doesn't have much experience in that. And it is one of the problems that we need to focus more in the future. And so in terms of Mongolia, we actively engage in international financial mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund, Global Environment Facility, the Adaptation Fund, and etc. And for example, we have like 20 small and large projects already approved with the Green Climate Fund with over like $1 billion financing. So these projects, for example, these projects do have many capacity building components in them. And I would advise young leaders to contact the government agencies and also the UN agencies or partner organizations who are implementing these projects, and to check whether they are planning any capacity building initiatives within the project activities for youth, and possibly take part in them. Because I think the information about these projects are all available online on the GCF website and also on government websites. So it's important to seek out and try to establish contact with organizations like the CCRCC and UN agencies. I think they would be welcome. They would welcome their initiation. So another way, which I thought was a possible good way to engage with the government was for young professionals to form a coalition, or like I mentioned before, like a non-governmental organization, and then come up with a project idea and then present it to the government so that they can find financing sources, or go to not only government organizations, also international organizations. You can go to them, and then they can find financing resources for that specific project if it's possible. So I think, so all in all, my advice is to just reach out, and do not be afraid to reach out, because I think everyone is just looking for ways to enhance climate action. And to, from my experience, government officials are always looking for ways to engage youth. And it's just very challenging when youth are not reaching out. So it's kind of hard to see what they are thinking. So yeah, it's important to reach out.
Thank you so much, Ichka, and I do agree with you. Like getting young people into decision making is very difficult, especially in developing country. And I do agree with you. There were some 2 points that, at least 2 points that young leaders can take to raise their voice and to make their voice like heard by the government. The first one is to engage with agencies, government agencies, and other like NGOs or international like organizations. And yeah, like I think that there are a lot of like open dialogue that young people can get engaged in to raise their voice. NDC Partnership and what we are having at the moment, for example, right? And I would like to share one experience from my own country. Like actually, I think it just applies for every country. When the government is about to release a policy, they will have a process called public consultation. That is when people from the public can have chance to raise their voice and add to the policies. So that is also the channel that young people can help and can step into the decision making process. Yeah, thank you so much.
Sorry, Mooney, can I add something to my answer as well?
Sure.
So another thing that I thought of while you were giving this example is that we have a lot of volunteer opportunities for youth to engage in international conferences. Like, for example, the government of Mongolia will be hosting the next Conference of the Parties for the Convention on Combating Desertification in 2000. I believe it was 2026, but there are other opportunities like that coming up in the future. So youth organizations are always welcome to volunteer there and engage with the process and potentially network with the people there. So
yeah,
that was one other way.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much, HCAR. I can see that there are some questions coming up in the Q&A box. So I think we will go through them one by one in order. The first one is from Jessica Lee. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sending the question. And the questions are for all of us, so like feel free to raise a hand or unmute yourself and get engaged into the discussion. So the question is, can you please give some tips on how negotiators, especially youth and young adults, can well integrate our advocacy at the decision-making table while sounding convincing and insightful? Are there any examples where conflicts lead to a stalemate, and how have changes been solved? Please provide some aspects related to climate finance negotiations. So I think for the first question we have just discussed. So we focus on the second one. There are any examples where conflicts lead to a stalemate and how challenges being solved? So I think HCAR, from the experience, do we see any conflicts when we get young people into the decision-making process from your own experience, and how it can be solved? Do you see any conflicts?
I'm trying to think the top of my head. So one of the challenges that I can see with youth in engaging with decision making is that, especially in case of Mongolia, I don't think the government really, not the government, just the policies are mostly made by government officials. So it's kind of difficult to infiltrate into that process from the outside. So I would say that again, I would advise you to do research about the issue, and then try to secure a secure some kind of way to reach out to the government officials or the organization that is responsible for that, and then try to secure a meeting or some sort of way to discuss about the opportunities. Because I think at first, I don't think the policymakers will just say, "Oh, come in, just let's talk." They won't do that. They're not open to that. Like, so you need to establish some kind of connection first, and then try to try to make your point through casual discussion or making up a meeting, or even like, I think even in Mongolia's case, Facebook, social media is a very huge deal. So spreading more information about that issue through social media would maybe that would be a way to get their attention and possibly get yourself involved in the process. Yeah, in the decision-making process. I don't know if that helps, but I don't have much experience in that sense. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question, but tough one, I think so. Like from my own experiences, I think that like in order for the government to take on any ideas or any like comments or thoughts from the young people or any other people, they will have to think over and whether the idea is feasible or applicable in their context. And if it is, they will like listen to our voice, and if not, so it's not applicable at this moment. So I myself don't see any conflicts regarding to that. Puche or Anish, would you like to add anything like from your own experience?
Yes, I think basically I agree with Ichika's point. Definitely, is that for youth to be able to basically have some degree of influence, you have to establish relationship with the policymakers first. Which it's a pretty I think it's pretty applicable everywhere, but at the same time it's also important to see that technically it shouldn't be that way. Policymakers also should be proactive to reaching out to youth and providing them with the safe space where they can basically express their concern on climate change, because it's about the youth's future mostly, not about the policymaker future per se. So yeah, basically just to complement that is to aspire for a future where youth has the safe space, and that space is well respected and seen as a important factors on decision-making processes.
Thank you so much, Puche. So I think like we unfortunately run out of time for Q&A session. So sorry for those whose question haven't been answered. So I would like to wrap up discussion today with and thank you so much, panelists, for all your nice great discussion we had just had. And it is the end of the panel discussion session today. Over to you, Zan.
Thank you, Muni. Thank you so much for moderating that insightful discussion. And thank you, of course, to all of our speakers for sharing your experience and your enthusiasm as we look ahead to a more inclusive financing of projects and commitments to achieve the Paris Agreement goal. We recognize that we have so far heard from just a small, albeit amazing sample of youth working on making finance more accessible and inclusive. But in order for us to hear from more youths working in climate action, we now turn to a brief overview of takeaways from the recent International Renewable Energy Agency Global Council on Enabling Youth Action for SDG 7. on the role of finance for youth and youth actions on SDG 7 on energy. The video is coming up.
The Arena Global Council on Enabling Youth Action for SDG 7 held a webinar to demystify private and public climate finance. During this webinar, several ideas regarding youth support and youth action funding were shared. Recognizing that the outcome of this meeting will contribute to the 2022 NDC Partnership Youth Engagement Forum, it is necessary to highlight the most important points from this discussion. The importance of youth engagement in the climate action agenda was emphasized, the role governments play in elevating youth voices within the international energy and climate agenda spaces, leveraging youth's unique perspectives, creativity, and digital skills is of particular importance.
However, there are still gaps in youth participation in engineering, innovation, and entrepreneurship. As a result, relevant stakeholders must increase their collaboration with young people and provide them with the necessary knowledge and skills to advance their engagement in the international energy and climate financing arena. In line with financing youth projects, participants also advocate for accessible financing from government and multilateral financial institutions to meet their needs. Notably, it is essential to raise awareness and implement policies that facilitate engagement between youth and relevant stakeholders. As we strive for a transition that is both sustainable and equitable, we must consider technical and gender dimensions every step of the way. To this end, we look forward to engaging in the 2022 NDC Partnership Youth Engagement Forum.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, this forum brought partners together to discuss youth-led innovation, the financing gap in the sustainability energy sector, and how to unlock private climate finance for youth. We hope to inspire many more discussions, workshops, forums like this one in the coming year. Moving on, it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Dio Gabinete, the NDC Partnership Regional Manager for Asia Pacific and Eastern Europe, for the closing remarks. Dio, we're grateful for your time. Then the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks, Zen. I think I was experimenting with this new avatar. Sorry about that. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to offer some remarks before we end this session. It's been wonderful to hear the conversations earlier on this very critical topic of climate finance and how the youth can not just do in terms of accessing finance, but also raising the call to ratchet the much needed resources to meet our climate goals. There's also so much innovation happening, many of which are being led by young people. And it's very encouraging and exciting to see that vigor and dynamism highlighted here. The NDC Partnership encourages members to incorporate relevant actions in their country or organizational context and collaborate across the partnership to strengthen youth engagement in NDC action. We strive to play a supportive role to increase knowledge sharing, communications, and collaboration around youth engagement with members. At the moment, we support about 28 countries in the Asia-Pacific region alone. We've seen promising strides taken by governments to encourage young people in various aspects of their NDC enhancement and implementation over the years. Cambodia, for example, identified multiple opportunities to enhance their climate change education in schools from primary level to the university level. And in Marshall Islands, they have been really a strong proponent of empowering youth and supporting traditional activities that contribute to NDC objectives. More and more, we see governments that are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of involving the very part of their population who are and will increasingly be in the front lines in combating climate change. In Tonga, with the support of the partnership last year, the country held a youth climate change dialogue, or Talanoa, to bring young people, students, and government leaders together to discuss youth representation in national climate policies. And as Ilka shared earlier, colleagues in Mongolia are gearing up for a national youth forum this year, this coming August, if I recall correctly, to support discussions on youth engagement and climate action. And this is the second of such platform the youth is that the government has organized for the youth to take part in a national dialogue for climate change. And as Pablo noted earlier, we look forward to continue building on the youth engagement plan of our country partners and mobilizing actors that can have a major impact on NDC implementation and enhancement. I also recognize that the conversation today and in previous sessions highlighted roadblocks to achieving the inclusive climate finance that is needed at greater speed and scale. There are substantial challenges to making opportunities for youth engagement obvious in climate finance discussions and to reinforce the participation of youth leaders in public and private finance. We've heard the importance of education around climate finance and the need for trainings and skill building. Speakers also called for recognition that the youth are not just a homogeneous block and their needs around financing and participation will be different, and such an approach will also be different and context-based. Additionally, rules and regulations around funding calls need to account for young people's potential lack of history or experience, even when considering investments. Other sessions have also highlighted the need for collaboration with governments in the revision and implementation of their NDCs, or in creating youth-tailored funds for climate action. As seen in other aspects of broader climate finance challenge, there's also need for follow-on support or for early funding, including mentorship, training, upskilling to ensure youth-led organizations or projects can take on their venture to the next level. Unlocking this usual bottleneck of getting stuck at the pilot stage and getting those projects to market or upscaling them for mainstreaming. It is clear from the discussions today that while policymakers acknowledge the role of the youth in addressing critical development challenges such as climate change, the onus also falls on the youth on how you can be more involved in political discussion and decision-making, however possible. Some countries have specific organic governance mechanisms to address this, such as youth unions or youth councils, but many others don't. And this is a challenge that really needs to be brought up more attention to political decision makers for them to create a mechanism to get the youth involved more organically and more programmatically in national and subnational decision making. This discussion today is just a starting point. It is our contribution to the host of other platforms that aim to germinate further and more dynamic means to involve the youth in climate action. We only had a short time to hear from experts in the field, but we hope to continue these conversations in bringing the insight you have to offer to your communities, countries, and the region. We hope to continue supporting necessary capacity building to create a pool of future climate finance experts. Young people play a powerful role in driving climate action. And as we've seen here today, we'll continue to see in the following teaching sessions. We need you to channel your experiences, ambition onto all aspects of NDC implementation. Thank you once again, and have a great and fruitful discussion in a short minute. Over to you, Zen.
Thank you very much, Dio, for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard from our speakers today, the financing gap is a critical challenge, and it's absolutely imperative that youths are engaged at all levels of decision-making to address climate crisis. We've learned a lot from our panels, from our speakers today, but of course, there's always so much more to learn. We will now transition to our teach-ins, which are an interactive version of the conversation we just had, where you get to learn and practice taking this important work further. Please use your registration or click the link shared in the chat to join the teach-in session. Once there, you have 3 options of workshops to join. If you have any questions, concerns, or technical difficulties, please share a message in the chat and a member of the team will assist you. You can also email us at events@ndcpartnership.org. We are delighted to offer the following teaching sessions. The first is by the Youth and Children Constituency to the United Nations Climate Change, who will dive into the engagement with UNFCCC climate finance work programs. The second session, and these are all parallel sessions, you have to choose one, it's not one after another. The second one is on youth empowerment in climate action platform. You're most welcome to join UNDP and the IJAS UNFCCC Regional Collaboration Center Bangkok to learn more about YICAP, the Youth Empowerment in Climate Action Platform. And the third is by GIZ and CASE, where you can join partners from GIZ, the German development agencies, to learn more about their key activities supporting renewable energy and climate efforts in the region. The teach-in sessions will conclude our forum today, but we of course invite you to stay in touch and continue this conversation with our social media. Thank you all so much for your enthusiasm, your work, and for sharing your time and capacities as powerful agents as change. I'll see you at the teach-in session.